The Minnesota Wild head into the postseason with optimism. Seth Toupal of Locked On Wild is here to discuss their prospects as they prepare for the Stanley Cup playoffs. Gil Martin here. The Locked On road to the Stanley Cup continues as we welcome Seth Toupal from Locked On Wild to take stock of Minnesota's chances to make a deep postseason run. And Seth, what do you feel is the biggest storyline for the Wild as we head into the Stanley Cup playoffs?
Well, it's a story that Minnesota sports fans are familiar with is can the Wild avoid the first round exit? It's a scenario that's played itself out. I think the Wild's, their last 6 series have lost. And so just looking to try to finally break through and see a little bit of postseason success. Obviously, last year against the St. Louis Blues, Wilds got out to a 2-1 lead, kind of took their foot off the gas a little bit, and the St. Louis Blues seized the opportunity to come back and win 3 straight to take that series. That's obviously a bad taste in the players that were on that team last year, bad taste in their mouth for this year. So can the Wild avoid some of those things that have led to first-round exits in the past? Can they finally be the one to break through and win a series? That's the big one in my mind here going into this series.
And do you feel like there are some signs that this year could be different?
I think so. I think you look at this, the mix last year, a team that scored 300 plus goals and just was one of those offensive juggernauts, but struggled defensively, struggled on special teams, struggled with their goaltending. You look at it now this year, and it's a team that it's been a bit of a work in progress to score goals, but they're better on the penalty kill, the power play up until the last couple of weeks of the season when Kirill was injured. Power play looked better. Goaltending has been much better this year than last year. And so it's a team that has all of those pieces you need to win in the postseason. And so Bill Guerin even said as much in some of his comments here as the season wrapped up, that he thought this year's team could beat last year's team. And I think it's a team that is better suited for postseason success this year.
What is the biggest reason why your team will win the Stanley Cup?
Goaltending, I think, is the biggest thing that this team has going for them this year. You have a goalie in Filip Gustavsson who has had a ton of success this season and has shown the ability to flat out steal games where the opponent plays better than the Wild do. He has gone toe-to-toe against some of the best teams in the league and has performed very, very well and has won games in those situations. So I think having that goalie that can get hot and can overcome a team that maybe struggles to put more than 1 or 2 goals on the board, I think that's a huge factor this year. And if Gus is not able to take that regular season success and translate it, then you got Marc-Andre Fleury too. Guy who is as decorated of a postseason goalie as there is in NHL history, a guy who had a pretty good regular season himself, and I think kind of thrives on the ability to, when the situation is dire, really put out a good performance. And so I think the goaltending is probably the biggest thing for this team that could lead to them winning a round or 2.
How about the biggest reason why they will not win the Stanley Cup?
I am going to go with the special teams for that. Obviously, penalty kill was better, but it's a more aggressive penalty kill than last year. And when you get to the postseason, you aren't facing your run-of-the-mill power plays like you would during the course of the regular season. You're facing likely the top 10 in the league. And so their ability to exploit a penalty kill and a team that at points throughout the season was very penalty prone, that I think will be the biggest factor. It happened last season against the St. Louis Blues in the playoffs. There just was a huge swing in special teams disparity between the two teams. So that I think would be the biggest factor for me, is that if they get on the wrong end of the special teams battle, that could be a problem.
Who do you feel is the key player to watch on the Wild as we head into the playoffs?
You'd think the answer here would be Kirill Kaprizov, right? But I'm going to go with Matt Boldy, because Boldy had a great sophomore season, 30 goals this year, 30 plus, in fact. And when Kirill Kaprizov got hurt, Boldy was on pace for, I think, 19 goals. He was projected for 19 goals for the whole season at that point. Once he stepped up and started to take over, he scored 13 goals plus in March by himself. And so he showed the ability to take over when Kirill Kaprizov wasn't in the lineup. But can he do that with Kirill still playing, but getting a ton of the attention from the opponents? The Wild need two guys that can really dictate and control the play. And so if Kaprizov does his thing, if Boldy steps up and shows that he can do the same, that's going to make this Wild team a problem to deal with.
What would a successful playoff run look like for the Wild, and what's at stake if they fall short?
So it's funny because they have gone through these last couple of postseasons with the Parise and contracts still on the books, and so you're making playoff runs with having $10+ million that you are not able to use. And so obviously for this team, the big window to contend is once those contracts and buyouts go to very minimal levels. So for this Wild team, they're kind of playing with house money in the short term because they're still super competitive. And you just think about how much more competitive they could be with that full allocation of the salary cap. So I don't think anybody's jobs are in danger if the Wild get eliminated in the first round. It just would be nice, as Kevin Malone said in The Office, it's just nice to win one. And so successful postseason for the Wild would be a win, especially in a 2-3 format, because the Dallas Stars are a fantastic team. If the Wild show that they can beat a team of that caliber in a postseason series, that's going to be a huge feather in Bill Guerin's cap this year. It's going to be disappointing if they don't, but ultimately with Guerin and with Dean Evison as head coach, those guys are going to be judged more on what happens after these cap penalties are gone. If you don't win then, that's when changes could happen.
All right. Well, Seth, hopefully they don't become the American version of the Toronto Maple Leafs. We don't want to see that. But thank you so much for stopping by. That does it for our Minnesota Wild preview here on the Locked On Road to the Stanley Cup. Be sure to subscribe to or follow Locked On Wild for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. The Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.